parts of who we are as human beings. Is to be human is to be anxious. And it's not something that we should feel a sense of stigma or shame or weakness about, because it is actually our primitive survival instinct and a critical part of our needs as human beings.
Hey folks, Jason here, your host of the Wealth Faculty Podcast. And this week, I got a chance to sit down with Dr. Jodie Lowinger. She's just written a book, The Mind Strength Method, and it's certainly a very interesting read. I've known Jodie for quite a while, an amazing lady. She's the founder of the Sydney Anxiety Clinic and has been working as a clinical psychologist in organisations, businesses, communities, hospitals for over 20 years. And one of the things that she has specialised in is the concept of anxiety and how it's showing up more than ever, more prevalent than ever in our society. Right from school-age children all the way through to older people, and in every corner of our life. And Jodie has written the Mind Strength Method, which is a very practical, very hands-on explanation of how to manage anxiety. It's never been more prevalent than, during and after the COVID epidemic, where anxiety was heightened for many people around the world and really had a major impact. An amazing conversation with an amazing lady, very, very learned, very, very passionate, very, committed to helping people manage through. It's very hands-on. I really enjoyed it. It's not a sort of, a highbrow conversation. It is very practical. Her book is amazing. The conversation was awesome. So I hope you enjoy this chat on the Wealth Faculty with Dr. Lowinger, Dr. Jodie. Take care. Bye for now. Dr. Jodie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jason. Lovely to be here with you.
So awesome to have you on the podcast. And I hear you're up in Hamilton Island on holiday, so I do appreciate you giving us some of your time, your holiday time. I know you haven't been on one for a little while.
Just hopped off the Hobie, I must say, so it's all good.
You're looking very relaxed and glamorous, I must say. So thanks for giving us the next 45 minutes, 50 minutes to talk about something pretty important to you. You've just launched your book that's been in the winds for a while, The Mind Strength Method, and it's going great guns. And the accolades to you, some information in there is absolutely amazing. But before we dive into chatting about the book and the Mind Strength Method, if it's all right with you, could you let my listeners know, and the listeners for me, my crowd, my tribe, are property investors across Australia and New Zealand, and many thousands of them listening into the podcast. But can you give us a little bit of background of where you come from? And if I could encourage you to tell about the story, potentially where it all started for you, potentially where your mum and grandma in the Holocaust world, an amazing story. But if you could elaborate a little bit to kick off the day. Yeah,
with pleasure. So I suppose starting from now, and maybe I'll then backtrack to my family history. I actually do a lot of work in your space as a high performance coach and an executive coach, and with a sort of area of specialization in resilience. But real estate and development is an area that is very in my comfort zone well and truly, because people in this game are constantly putting yourself out there and having to be vulnerable, and in sales and negotiation and influence, and experiencing knockbacks, and have that capacity to push on and push on and push on and build peak performance in that space. So it's an industry that I feel incredibly passionate about, and I do a lot of work in sales, negotiation, and influence. I was just actually interviewed by a real estate super coach who I shall keep nameless, Jason, because I'm not sure if you want me to name the name, because you are the real estate super coach. But no, it is an area that I feel very passionate about. And in fact, my dad was a real estate agent. So he worked in commercial real estate, and he's no longer alive, but he was certainly an incredible role model to me. So I wear several hats. I am a high performance coach to business leaders, and I'm a doctor of clinical psychology and an anxiety mindset and resilience expert. The various areas that I work in, and building high performance leadership. And so before my clinical credentials, I was in management consulting in change management and business strategy. But going way back to before I was born, my family was originally from Czechoslovakia on my mum's side, and she was born just at the dawn of World War II, and they were living in a small town called Topolchany, and they were uprooted, taken out of their homes, and taken. My mum, at the age of 1, was taken into a labor camp called Novaki, and her aunt was taken to Auschwitz, to a concentration camp of, one of the worst of the concentration camps. And she was actually there for a long time. And while she was there, it's my great aunt, she was given the job to go through the belongings of the people who were actually taken to the gas chambers to be slaughtered, to be murdered. And as she was going through these belongings, it was an absolute miracle. She came across a photo of my mum, and this photo is of my mum with outstretched arms as a baby, to be picked up, to be hugged. And so my great aunt, her name was Elsa, and so she took this photo and she smuggled this photo and she hid it in the cracks next to her bed, and this was what allowed her to hold on to her sense of humanity, because a strategy in for prisoners of war and in death camps is to dehumanize individuals, and this allowed her to hold on to her humanity. And it was her story of absolute resilience to realign out of fear and realign to meaning and to values and to purpose. And this sort of is one of the core key stories of my childhood. She survived Auschwitz and was reunited with my mum and the family, and is a story of incredible courage and survival. And it's laid the foundation for me to be just wanting to help people to build resilience right from a really young age. My mum was, my mum has always been fairly anxious, given that she was born into a labor camp, and death and stories of survival around her.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to sort of, hear that. And often when someone you chat to has some passion, sometimes there's a backstory, sometimes there's a history or something that drives them. And I was curious to hear and read and see that has formed part of your drive and passion for this. Were you aware of that when you were younger? Was that part of your family conversation, or was it something you observed as a young child and a young adult, and then you very quickly chose or pursued this professional world of at university and making it your career? But was it something you were aware of, or was it something sort of outside of the conversation, with things you didn't talk about?
We always were very open about emotions in my family, and quite comfortable to share and to go through these sorts of emotional experiences together and support. And I was, certainly a parent to my parent to quite a large degree, because my mum, as a very young child, was separated for almost a year from her parents and hidden in in an attic and hidden in a barn and at the risk of death. And these were the stories of her very early childhood, and then eventually came to live in Australia. And so I think I was always sort of right from a very early age was very much a protector and a caregiver, and quite intrigued probably by the experience of emotions, based on these stories of my previous generations, and which became stories of my childhood. And so through school, I was actually quite artistic in school. I came first in the state in art in my major work. And the reason I mention that is because I did my major work actually on a series of emotions in children. And I've actually got that. I only recently got that framed, and it's quite intriguing because at the time I certainly, as you say, I wasn't necessarily overtly aware that this was an area that I felt passionate about. And in fact, I started doing a Bachelor of Design. I was thinking that I would get into design and in advertising, to be this, kick-ass advertising executive. But art was my thing, design was not my thing. So then I subsequently moved into studying psychology and really found it an area that I felt extremely passionate about.
When did the idea of anxiety become something that you thought, hey, listen, this is a challenge, an opportunity, a problem that I'd love to sink my teeth into? It's where you've specialized for quite a while now in your career and your businesses and the book, combating anxiety, like, record levels of anxiety or anxiety related mental illnesses and stuff like that going on in society. Was there a time when you saw that this was a challenge, a problem, and you said, that's what I want to work on?
Yeah, I originally wanted to specialize, and in fact did quite a bit of specialization in child and adolescent psychology. I did my undergraduate thesis in child development, cognitive development, and was quite passionate about helping children. And funny that, right? Where's the irony? Helping children deal with their pathology, right? But then I was poached out of I did my undergraduate psychology with a view to doing clinical, but was poached into corporate from PwC into management consulting and change management consulting and business strategy and leadership development. So did quite a number of years working in management consulting, and then was poached into Macquarie Bank and did internal consulting for Macquarie Bank for a number of years, and then went and did a Doctor of Clinical Psychology and worked at Harvard and did a whole heap of stuff. That's really when I started to say that anxiety was what I wanted to specialize in. And so I did my doctoral research in anxiety, and that was actually child anxiety, with a view to building preventive programs in schools. So I did actually do quite a bit of specialization in child and adolescent. And so one of the hats that I wear is actually as a parenting expert, and at the Sydney Anxiety Clinic and what is now a digital business called The Anxiety Clinic, where we're building products and programs now in this incredible digital space to help people on scale is everything that I want to do and am doing. But in essence, the business is helping adults, kids and teens with anxiety, stress, mood and behavioral challenges. So the other hat that I wear is as a keynote speaker, and I'm often doing a lot of speaking engagements in schools and working with parents as well as educators and primary schools and high schools to build resilience and well-being and anything in the realm of mental health, performance and well-being.
So let me ask you a quick question for those listening in. How do you define anxiety? So nervousness, anxiety, depression, Are they all sort of one and the same hat, or is it something very specific when it comes to how do we define anxiety?
Well, I define anxiety probably a little bit differently to many, let's say. I'm quite passionate about changing the way people perceive anxiety and really taking it out of a medical context and bringing it very much into a human context.
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm.
in answer to your question, the first thing that comes to mind in your question of how to define anxiety is, I would say, being human. Because it is probably one of our most primitive parts of who we are as human beings. Is to be human, is to be anxious. And it's not something that we should feel a sense of stigma or shame or weakness about, because it is actually our primitive survival instinct and a critical part of our needs as human beings. So what anxiety is our physiological reaction to threat in our environment. So let's sort of think about the cave person in all of us, because we are still in essence cave people. And we engage in very primitive ways. And that's brilliant, especially in the world of property and real estate and development, because it's heart and soul about being able to recognize the drivers of human behavior. And when you can recognize that we actually engage in a very primitive way, where there is primitive engagement, there is predictability in human behavior. And where there's predictability, you can leverage that and utilize that understanding to be able to build effective and cohesive relationships, which is heart and soul so important to the work that you do. But in answer to your question, anxiety is our response to threat. So back to the cave person in us, if we were to leave our cave and we were to see something that was a predator, we would want that fight or flight instinct to kick in. It is the adrenaline and cortisol in our bloodstream getting us to focus in on our threats and getting us to respond with agility and quickly to either fight or to run away. That's what anxiety is. The challenge in our contemporary world is that there's a lot of unpredictability in our environment. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so we have this thing in our brain called worry, which is a perceived threat. It's our fear of the possibility of something bad happening. And so what happens is the physiological reaction of that perceived threat kicks in as if it was real threat. And so we find ourselves in this contemporary world where we grapple with all sorts of uncertainty, because that's our primary perceived threat. It tips us into anxiety when we don't necessarily need it to be activated.
So are you sort of saying here, I'm sort of thinking, okay, well, anxiety per se is not a bad thing. It actually keeps us safe or helps us survive in moments where we need to react fast or be anxious about, is that maybe that tiger's going to eat us, or is that car going to run into us, or whatever it might be in our regular everyday. But you're saying it's an over anxious. There's more threats potentially that aren't real or over analyzed by our mind, our brain, our body, and it's this over anxious, more anxiety than we need normally. Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And, there are certainly individual differences. I talk about human behavior being predominantly predictable, but where the individual differences come into effect is our life experience, our genes, the way our brain is structured. So people have certain predispositions, so inherent vulnerabilities that they might be born with, or environmental circumstances. So I conceptualize anxiety on a continuum of normal human behavior. In some people, mild, moderate, severe. Some people might have some physiological experience that makes them inherently more vulnerable, and then life experience that might make an individual a little bit more vulnerable to that, what's called the hijacking amygdala, the part of our brain that is the control center of the fight or flight reaction.
Yep.
One of the key messages that I would love everybody to recognize is that if some of these experiences are relevant for you listening today, is recognizing that the vulnerabilities, the challenges are all, I don't even say treatable, I say helpable, because I want us to let go of stigma and shame and to recognize that it's not weak to experience anxiety. It is human to experience anxiety. And so it's not about not having the difficult emotions or the difficult, physiological experiences sometimes, which is what anxiety is. It's about creating space to choose how we respond to them. And we want to respond with helpful actions rather than unhelpful actions. And that is core to the mind strength method. Very, very doable.
That's a great distinction. And, for me, a bunch of those are landing right now. It's like, it's very normal to have anxiety. It's not abnormal. That's the human experience is what you're saying. But if we learn how to react to that consciously and well and in a healthier state, mentally, emotionally, physically, that anxiety or stress becomes less impactful, let's say, to our everyday life is really what you're saying. That's a great distinction. It's not about not having anxiety ever, right? It's about managing that stress and anxiety that's going to be normal in our life, right?
100%. And if this key message was front and center in people's minds as a society, society would just be flourishing in so much better a state, because we still have these societal messages that say it's weak to feel, you're not good enough if you feel, and you got to shove it down. You've got to numb those feelings, and that's when it creates much more damaging problems in society, where people feel like they have to escape from their emotions. And sometimes there's various representations of these. It might be drinking, it might be gambling, it might be gaming, it might be, numbing our emotions through comfort eating, or some of the more severe representations, self-harm. And as I'm sure sort of suicide is the most severe example of our human attempt to numb big and difficult emotions. And we have horrendous statistics of suicide, around the world now, where people just grapple with the challenges that society face of the perceived need to be perfect in order to be okay.
In your book, you say, and I haven't had a chance to read it front back to cover yet, but I've got my hands on it today and I've been leafing through it all morning. And one of the things that jumped out at me was the stress is the new normal. Can you talk to me about that a little bit? Because I think I understand a bit, but I think this is kind of, a really nice little opportunity to talk about, what is normal, what is not normal. Stress, is stress the new normal, like more stress as the new normal? What do you mean by that?
Well, we get caught up. What I say, we get caught up in the tsunami of life, right? And this is the world that we live in. And it's not about necessarily hating it and fighting it, but what we want to do is recognize that how can we realign to the society that we live in, and certainly potentially create change and be leaders of change where we recognize, let's say, the environment as one. But stress impacts us at levels that we have not yet caught up with, because the world that we live in is a technologically driven world, and we are biological beings living in a technological world. And now, this was a problem pre-COVID. This is not a COVID problem. COVID has just escalated the digitized world that we're in exponentially. It serves a very powerful, helpful purpose to a large degree, but certainly it's out of line with what we need as human beings. So we are biological creatures, but the world that we live in is taking us away from, we have green screens, but we need actual green trees around us. But the other, so there's two elements, digital connection always being on, enormous uncertainty, fast pace. But the other is the impact of social media perpetuating our sense of needing to be perfect in order to be okay, and creating an airbrushed society where we perceive that we have to uphold these certain standards that are bombarded into us from a very young age now.
Yeah. And what would you say right now to those listening in? COVID certainly has changed a lot, like you're saying, how we interact in work and potentially more than just work life now. What advice or warnings, tips or strategies would you give those thinking about work from home? No offices, less contact. Is there some challenges, opportunities there to do it right or do it better?
Yeah, there's heaps of opportunities to do it right and do it better. In the book, what I cover is very much around empowerment. It's a book that aligns and will help everybody, not just about people who experience anxiety to more severe levels. The Mind Strength method is a 4-step methodology that allows us to learn about who we are as human beings and pivot and realign with a toolkit to build resilience. And part of that toolkit is recognizing the mind-body connection and scientifically supported strategies to bolster our well-being in the context that we live in, this digitized world and the fast pace, the uncertainty. We want to build high performance within that context and be the best that we can be within that context. So if we butt heads with it and say, damn you context, damn you stressful society, I'm going to go and live back in that cave that I was in when I was a cave person, right? That's not the reality. We want to respond with helpful actions. And that is core to what the Mind Strength method is about. And ultimately, the brilliant thing about this is that when we can build a resilient mindset, we're building peak performance. We're building a high performance mindset. So I work in a coaching space. I work predominantly with CEOs, senior leaders in real estate, partners, directors, principals of agencies. I'm working with some of the top real estate agencies in Australia and as their high performance coach. And it is the Mind Strength method that we jump into. It's just that when you're in a business context, as you absolutely know, Jason, it's about what are we realigning to? We are realigning to business strategy. And so this is, it's heart-centered action. That's what that is. And so as human beings, it's our capacity to build self-awareness and take yourself, in a nutshell, out of the unhelpful stuff and realign to the helpful stuff that enables us to move forward in an optimized way, professionally and personally.
A bit more aligned with where you are. Could you take us through the 4 steps for those listening in? Encourage you to grab the book, The Mind Strength Method. Some great stuff in there. Very practical too. I love all of the charts and pictures and activities, Jodie. I'm a very visual learner and I'm really enjoying it. So, but could you take everyone through, a quick overview of the 4 steps and, what they entail sort of, from a high level?
Yeah, 100%. And thank you for that comment. I wrote the book in a way because I wanted to connect with everybody. And so I wrote it in such a way that it's not for any particular gender. It's for, as much for men as it is for women. It's as much for parents as it is for business leaders. Parents are so often business leaders. So you know, it's a book that's designed to connect with everybody, and it's extremely practical. The book is from cover to cover. Honestly, if you were to put a value on the content in terms of therapy alone, it would be thousands and thousands of dollars. I kid you not, in that book. I have shared in abundance, and I have done that purposefully because it is a heart-driven mission that I'm on, to be able to change, to help the world, basically. So the toolkit is built on 7 years of clinical training and decades of experience. The 4 steps are, step 1 is really about awareness. It's awareness of our fight or flight driven thoughts, feelings, and actions. So what do we do when we have got worry thoughts taking hold in our brain, aka also known as being human? Okay, because who doesn't have worry thoughts? Well, I think the person who doesn't have worry thoughts wouldn't necessarily be alive. So
yeah, they'd probably be dead.
they'd be dead. So I hope everybody's putting up their hand right now, because I hope everybody listening is alive right now. So yes, so this is a human thing. It's building awareness around, you know, when worry is bossing us around, it tips us into fight or flight, because we are wanting to move away from worry. Like, worry is there for a reason. It's there to help us in the case of real threat. But in our contemporary society, there's a lot of perceived threat. So it's what happens in this context. Building awareness around that is step 1. I talk about building awareness of what we're pushing away from, because in life, we don't want to be driven by fear, right? We want to let go of fear. We don't want fear to boss us around. We want to be driven by what's in our heart-driven actions, our value-driven actions, our strategically driven actions, right? And this is what we want, as I conceptualize this as the pull towards a desired direction in life.
That's a conscious choice rather than an unconscious, I got to run away, I think I'm afraid type idea, like sort of, you know, choosing or
100%. And we can all do this. You know, that's the beauty of it, is that it's very doable. So anybody who is suffering in silence, please do not suffer in silence. You know, there are too many people suffering in silence. There are too many people, having worry stories that say, I'm not good enough. They're going to judge me negatively. I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to fail. I'm not going to make enough money to put food on the table. Now, real estate, yes, we're in a pretty, dare I say, I'll just say hot time. But you can fill in the blank there. We are we're in a good time at the moment, but this is not necessarily going to last, and there's a lot of uncertainty in development, in real estate, in construction, in your space, and it's so cyclical. So you have to move with uncertainty. You have to sit in enormous uncertainty. So it's how to pivot and realign in that context. Step 3 of the Mind Strength method is the Mind Strength Toolkit. It is a toolkit to build resilience. Everything logical, everything doable, really straightforward stuff, nothing fancy, but built on a ton of clinical experience and strategies. And evidence base, where I've literally worked with thousands and thousands and thousands of people to build an evidence base of the efficacy of the Mind Strength method. Step 4 predominantly is building a well-being action plan, so you can then live your life in alignment with, in a business context, peak performance, optimized, professionally and personally with mental health and well-being and resilience.
Yeah, having a great toolkit that's practical is so important. Sometimes there's lots of things you could do, but what can you do? Sometimes maybe could you speak to that for a second? If somebody is sitting there and maybe feeling worried or anxious, or sometimes the first step is sometimes the hardest step. What would be a simple, easy start for someone maybe listening in right now and going, okay, what would be a good first step? Where would you start if you were chatting to someone like that?
Yeah, really, really great question. Where I do start is building awareness around what worry is saying and how anxiety is showing up, if it is in fact an anxiety specific issue that I'm helping a person with. But ultimately, in a leadership and in a business context, it is about thinking, where are the pain points? Where are things getting in the way? What are the strategic goals? What are the stretch goals? If you could achieve anything, what does that look like? So, but if a person is feeling emotional distress, a very good go-to as a quick and easy is starting to notice when worry is taking hold, worry as an unhelpful mental process. If you can build awareness of what worry sounds like, what the narrative is there, and notice, because that will typically hurtle you into the future about stuff that's out of your control. And if you can bring self-awareness when that's happening and move from worry, which is typically around the stuff that's out of our control, the uncertainty, because this is an uncertainty problem, into move from worry into problem solving and action planning around what's in your control, because there's no point worrying about what's out of our control. Now, we all do it, right? It's just because that's our automatic reaction. We want certainty as humans. Believe me, before I launched the book, I was like, so much worry because it was sitting with enormous uncertainty. And now I've got a bestseller, boom. So I have proof of concept now. So feeling good. But certainly we all experience worry. We all, and you know what, Jason, another one of the things is I am so grateful for the space that I specialize in, because people, and what I'm about to say is a generalization, but it is a generalization built on a lot of experience. Anxiety is the protective instinct at play. Anxiety is, our desire to help people, our desire to help the tribe, our desire to protect the tribe, our desire to keep ourselves safe and well, keep our loved ones safe and well, and keep our organization safe and well, right? We want things to be okay. So what I find very commonly, the thread that happens in people who experience anxiety is caring human beings. Kind heart, analytical mind, higher need for order and control, because when we have control, we have certainty. Where we have certainty, we have protection and safety. So these are some of the concepts around people who experience anxiety are oftentimes kind, caring human beings. But it is that double-edged sword. And so I want people, if you who are listening, if you can relate to this, recognize that these are inherent strengths, qualities to feel very proud of, and recognize that, yes, it does come with its challenges. Sometimes the challenges can be debilitating. Sometimes the challenges can be terrifying. But those challenges are very helpable. So don't suffer in silence. Seek out the help that you need, whether it's from the book, whether it's from, the Mind Strength Method, or whether it's from, leveraging your community and your leaning in, connecting with your family, your friends, or seeking out the help of a trained mental health professional. The bottom line is, do not suffer in silence when there are very helpful strategies available.
Absolutely. And, you know, what I'm loving in the last 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, you know, even with my son's school and you know, I can see the recognition and the encouragement of people coming forward and saying, hey, it's perfectly fine to feel stressed or worried or have anxiety or say I'm not doing okay. And, you know, I think that's fantastic. And your work's continuing to spotlight that stuff and not let it sort of hide in the corner, be okay to come out and get some help. So I think it's fantastic. So when on one of your pages in your book, 268, I don't know if you remember, but there's this pyramid, and at the bottom of the pyramid, I'll show you the picture, see if you can see what I'm talking about. One of the things, you know, and one of the things I love about this is it's very practical. So, you know, if you're feeling a bit sort of stressed or anxious or whatever, maybe, you know, am I right in saying, or can you comment that sometimes it's good just to do some practical stuff first before you jump to some conclusions? Maybe get some sleep, get a little bit more exercise, eat a little bit better tomorrow, the next day or something, and see how you're rolling, and that sort of almost like a bit of self-medication. Now, there's probably not the right phrase to say it, but, you know, take care of yourself a little bit better with some practical things too.
Definitely. And this is good, you know, it's good self-medication, right? Because
Yeah.
this is the mind-body connection,
Yes.
and completely evidence-based, scientifically supported strategies are some of the most fundamental, straightforward things. As you say, exercise, connecting with family, connecting with friends, eating well, you know, making sure that you look after yourself with good food and staying hydrated with water. And, you know, yes, indeed. Cheers, Jason. Cheers to you, man. But, you know, what I want people to do is let go of perfectionism in this, especially people who care and want to do well, especially high performers, right? Is oftentimes we think we've got to do the perfect, you know, Pilates class, and we've got to do the perfect HIIT workout. And then life takes hold, and we're incredibly busy juggling a million things, family, profession, etc., etc. And so you know, meditation is a classic example of that. We think, oh God, I'm not going to be able to do that. They talk about best practice meditation is a lot of time. Now, best practice is best practice for a reason, because the evidence demonstrates it's really good for you. However, if that's getting in the way of doing anything at all, we want to let go of that. So yes. One of the things that I often say is small is better than not at all. 2 minutes is better than no minutes. A walk around the block, even if it's a walk to the corner of your street and back, is going to do you the world of good, because it takes us out of the sympathetic nervous system and re-engages the parasympathetic nervous system. And when we're out of the sympathetic nervous system, we are out of fight or flight. And a whole ton, you know, I talk a lot about the neuroscience of all of this. It is understanding the way the brain works and leveraging that understanding to build high performance and build mental health and well-being and resilience. But something as simple as walking, it activates the calming parts of our brain. And, you know, in a business context, doing walking meetings, it opens up this part of the brain. So we're more creative, we're more connected, less cortisol, more oxytocin. We're going to connect. So walking meetings with your team members is a very good thing, with your loved ones, with your husband or your wife or your boyfriend or your girlfriend, you know, connection. So quick wins are very, very helpful.
Quick and easy wins. No, that's great. It's very practical. And And I've done a few things with my kids in the past. And my eldest is almost 18 now, and often for me too, I used to manage my anxiety or worry is my sort of final thing for myself to switch off that kind of, voice in the back of my head was, there's nothing you can do about it right now, and worrying about it is not going to fix anything. So why don't you go to bed and have a good sleep, and then tomorrow we can get up and see what we can do about it then. And I've trained myself and my kids with that. The kids are a bit anxious about school or a certain race or an exam or something like that. And I said, right now, there's nothing that worry is going to do about that. Go to bed, have a good night's sleep, and tomorrow we'll be fresh. And I like that. Something practical, something simple, walk to the corner. But the science behind it is what's happening, right? It's getting the body going. It's getting those things firing that we need.
Very much so. And, what you're talking about is a really wonderful strategy. In fact, in the book, I talk about this as a key strategy. It's called postponing worry, because it's strategies and there's, a step-by-step description of how to engage in this. It's about you being in control of worry rather than worry being in control of you.
Yes.
And we can't shut down our thoughts. We cannot stop our thoughts, but we can change our relationship with them. And, there's certain tools in the book and in the mind strength methodology where we can allow ourselves, because sometimes worry will want to boss us around at 2 a.m., at 3 a.m. So it's, if you try and squash it at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. and say, just go away, doesn't quite work. So we have to pay respect to our thoughts, but it's engaging with them in a way where you feel more in control of those thoughts rather than the thoughts bowling you over and being in control of you.
Yeah. Could you talk maybe for a couple of minutes about the world of financial stress and financial anxiety? Certainly for me, coaching people about money for almost 20 odd years now, seems to be one of these things that seems to cause a lot of stress for people, a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry. Like you're saying before, can I pay the bills? Can I make it work? Do you see that stuff showing up in your work too? I'm sure it all sort of crosses over from time to time, the anxiety about, financial stress. And is there any sort of tips you could share with the listeners today from your research and some of your mind strength methods?
Yeah, absolutely. Financial stress, again, that protective instinct kicking in because we want to be safe. We want to be well. It's if you think about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need shelter, we need to be able to put food on the table. So it does tap into our primitive survival instinct, and it is a worry story that can wreak havoc in our lives. And oftentimes for the protector in us, the most caring of human beings, right? And so basically what we can recognize is that grappling with that story is trying to get certainty when there is no certainty. And so if you can start to conceptualize, let's call it the money story or the finance story, or the I'm going to screw up story, whatever you want to call it, it is a story. And is it helping you? Well, in all likelihood, people believe I need to worry because if I don't worry, I won't necessarily be motivated towards action. But that's not actually the case. It's not worry that motivates us towards action. It's it's not worry that helps us towards action. Worry actually takes us away from it. It is problem solving around what's in our control. That is what helps us. And so starting to build self-awareness around what is going on, that worry story around finances, it might just as easily be a health story or an illness story or a judgment story, right? They are all just our attempts to grapple with uncertainty. And so move out of that into action planning around what's in your control. Yeah. And that is the key to success.
Put your efforts into those things and not into the worry, the anxiety, the stress, the the crazy eight, the circular thinking pattern. But like you said, it's only diminishes your capacity to think clearly by stressing and worrying about it.
Exactly. And then do
Yeah.
everything that you share in all of your wisdom, Jason, is about, implementing what is in your control, which is the whole toolkit that you share with your community over the decades of experience that you've had. And, that's something we want to move from anxiety into practical action around what's in your control.
No, I love it. And, I think that was it was quite a good little one there. You're saying, okay, well, no, just so we know, there's no such thing as certainty. So let's let that go. Let's work on the things we can, have some influence on, but you can't be certain. Like there's no like, if I do this, this will go exactly perfectly to plan. We will do our best to make it go there, but, perfection, like you said, is not possible all the time anyway.
Yeah, and the challenge is our body wants certainty, our mind wants certainty.
Yes,
So we have
yes.
to build awareness around that and start to practice sitting with the discomfort of uncertainty and implementing around what's in our control.
Mm-hmm. But there's a little sort of interesting conversation in and around, are we, becoming too safe? Is it something, like I think about where I grew up as a kid, and is it something that because we're now just more aware of it, encouraging people to come out, or, I was like, oh, well, when did anyone ever talk about being anxious when I was a kid? I couldn't remember it. I don't know if it was the same for you, or maybe because of your industry and your career, you got a bit more exposure. But is it because we're more aware and we're happy to talk about it, or is it because maybe a bit of both? Is it because our social system has become just more stressful and fast and insanely complicated, when it comes to our world? What are your thoughts on that one?
It's both. Fortunately, we are more aware, and I probably have talked for a cumulative thousands and thousands of hours with the media and with on spaces like this to
Yes.
to try and be a champion of change and to build awareness and to help people to feel empowered and destigmatize a lot
Mm.
of mental health challenges that people experience. I take great joy in working hard to do that. So we are certainly as a society building more awareness, and which is a great thing.
Yes.
However, society is also uh, does engage at an increasingly fast pace. I write in the book about these societal issues, and there was a lot more certainty in our work context, predictability, less change. If you think about the world of work now, it is such an agile space. And
Mm.
so we have to sit with greater level of comfort in being agile and leveraging opportunity. So many of the keynotes that I do is about how to manage change as organizations, how to build peak performance amidst uncertainty and change is one of the
Yeah.
key keynotes that I'm commonly asked to do, because the business context is such that is out of line with what we typically feel comfortable in. And so there's a lot of stress in the workplace because of the level of uncertainty that we have to sit with.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a combination of both.
And with that, the just talking for a moment on this peak performance concept, you and I have both sort of moved in some business coaching circles and some different information flowing our way. The idea that a healthy level of stress is actually good for certain things as long as it's recognized and managed. Can you talk about that for a moment? Sort of, when stress okay and then it becomes not okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So burnout is a hot topic at the moment. Lots and lots of people wanting to know more about burnout, because COVID has tipped many people, many whole organizations into burnout.
Yes.
Not funny. It's a real problem in society at the moment.
Yeah.
And so what we want to recognize is that burnout is because of this protracted uncertainty. Mindset aspects are what contributes to burnout. Remind me, Jason, what was your original question?
No, I was just sort of saying, when we've got lots of stress, but sometimes a certain amount of stress is good for us to, build muscle. Let's build mental toughness. Let's build emotional toughness. You don't sort of build muscle by sitting on the couch and not stressing your muscles. Is it the same about, the stress of stress? A good level of stress is good because you can build up, resistance, resilience, whatever that might mean,
Yes. So stress is it's not just about amount. So it's not just about quantity. It's such an important point that you raise here. It's about many factors, in essence, and it's not just about the hours that you work. That's not what tips us into burnout in and of itself. That can be a contributor, but it is about mindset. It's about what are we focused on. Mindset is critical to facilitate peak performance, even, and mitigate against burnout. Even if we're working incredibly long hours, it is a critical component of this. So we can be in a state of flow, in a state of hell yeah, my adrenaline is pumping and I'm on fire here and I'm loving it, right? So this is what's called eustress. It's called it's positive stress. Eustress being EUSTRESS. And when we feel that hell yeah, let's do this kind of mindset, so that's when we're focused on our goals and we're high performers in that. Whereas when we are getting caught up in fear, getting caught up in focusing on our threats, that's what's going to tip that adrenaline into overdrive and tip us into burnout and make us much more at risk, not just of mental health problems, but of physical health problems, because protracted stress, chronic stress, wreaks havoc on our mind and on our body. Good news again, positive stories, positive messages. These are all very, very helpable. If you're experiencing long-standing stress, if you feel that you're not quite yourself and your mind is spinning in overdrive, if you feel like you're exhausted and you don't know what's going on, it certainly could be any one of many physical health problems, but these are also hallmark features, characteristics of burnout. Burnout has a habit of creeping up on people, but when you're sitting in burnout, it is a feeling like, some of my leaders, I've worked with leaders of multinationals who have been in burnout, and they describe it. One person comes to mind. He said to me, I don't know, I just don't feel like myself. I don't know what's going on. I cannot function. I feel like I'm walking through sludge. And you cannot just soldier on through this, because it becomes a physiological challenge that you must look after yourself if you're sitting in burnout.
Yeah, and I'm assuming it'd show up in chronic ways, in physical ways, the longer that you push that through. So, for those who are feeling that way right now, like Jodie said, reach out. Yeah.
And there are, in fact, there are chapters in the book that are specifically on managing against burnout and depression. And, one of the tools in the Mind Strength Toolkit is in fact powerful mood boosters not just to help if you're in burnout or if you're experiencing depression, but to provide strategies to prevent it in the first place. Prevention is always better than cure. We want to prevent, preempt and prevent.
Yeah, well, it's been fantastic to chat to you today, Dr. Jodie. I know my team have put in an order for your books. We've got 110 team, and I've got all of them a copy of the book going their way as well. My leadership team are reading the book too, because we've certainly had a few of our team have some challenges and stresses, as we have as leaders, over COVID times, and there's very practical, amazing, good stuff in the book, and I encourage anyone listening in to get hold of it. It's excellent. So I do appreciate you spending some time with us today, but I do ask one question of all of my guests. The podcast is called The Wealth Faculty, and we talk about the people you surround yourself with, the faculty members that you put on your faculty, but also the faculty, the physical, mental, emotional faculty that you have, that you bring to life. I do ask a question of all my guests, and it is, what is the true meaning of wealth? Dr. Jodie, what is the true meaning of wealth to you?
Oh, that is such an awesome question. I'll share the first thing that's come to my mind. Well, there's a dual first thing that's come to my mind, let's say. So certainly the true meaning of wealth for me is the well-being of my family and love and joy amongst my family. I have a beautiful life partner, my husband, and I have 3 magnificent kids. So that is absolute wealth and abundance for me. So that is the true meaning of wealth for me. As a professional, the true meaning of wealth professionally is, quite frankly, helping people transform. So I'm on a very heart-driven mission to change the world. It is such an authentic statement, because I know the power of the Mind Strength method, and the feedback that I'm getting from people on scale is that it's transforming their lives. And I cannot tell you how much joy that gives me, because it is a new narrative on anxiety, and it is leveraging a very powerful wealth of evidence-based strategies. So the Mind Strength method, reaching the world and having global impact, is absolutely a powerful meaning of wealth for me.
Nice, and I can tell you it's well on its way. I've seen many little pieces of the web connecting from my seat too. So well done, and sorely needed. And hopefully this conversation today will continue that ripple effect out into affecting the world and doing something amazing as you have been doing for so long. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for writing the book. And appreciate your time, Dr. Jodie, on the Wealth Faculty today.
Beautiful, Jason. Thank you for chatting and having me on your show. And it's just a joy to connect with equally heart-driven professionals such as yourself. Really loved chatting with you today.
Beautiful. Thank you. Hey, thanks for joining us on the Wealth Faculty. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe. Where all good podcasts are found, you can find us there. And if you want to watch it, you can subscribe on YouTube, Positive Mentor TV. And until the next episode, take care. Bye for now.